another Yugoslav firearm coming to our shores as of late. This, of course, is a Zastava M83. It's one of many different models that seem to be arriving and available from a bunch of different outlets. This one came to me by way of AIMSurplus as an X grade. We'll get into what that means in a little bit. But they're not the only ones that have been offering these. I believe Classic has as well as Centerfire Systems, and I think there are some others too. As I said, some of these outlets are also carrying other models as well. Just a quick bit of like historic background, as I always do for people that have just never heard of the thing that I'm talking about. There's not that much known, and I'm certainly not an expert, but we'll get into a little bit. So this is a Zastava M83, of course. It's a revolver developed in the 80s. They were produced into the 90s, but they are currently discontinued. A couple of the retailers that are out there are saying that these are surplus or military surplus, or saying that these were intended for use by the military or law enforcement. There's a lot of information that kind of contradicts that from people kind of in the comment section that are from this part of the world, saying that that's not really true, that these were all primarily privately owned, these were sold commercially, stuff like that, and then they were either seized or turned in, and they were quite popular, so there's many of them, and after that they were kind of sold off to the US market instead. I'm sort of more inclined to believe this latter version for a couple of reasons. For starters, I find it a little odd that any military or police force would be looking to adopt revolvers as late as the 80s or 90s. Maybe there was some kind of niche use, or maybe, some private security companies perhaps would be something close to it. The other thing is that many of these are, many, I mean, like we're talking probably as many as half, are quite customized. They'll have, crazy customized grips, some of which are entirely handmade with all sorts of elaborate designs and, ergonomic modifications. A lot of the revolvers, that is, are engraved in all sorts of elaborate ways or pimped out otherwise. They'll have, gold-plated triggers and hammers, well, at least what looks like gold. I don't know if it literally is, stuff like that. And you just wouldn't see that on military-issued weapons, typically because they're not really your property as the person to whom they were issued. They're still government property, and I don't think that would be so much acceptable. In fact, they actually have a really high level of modification even by private gun standards as well. But in any case, that's kind of why I'm more inclined to believe. There are some guns that seem to be kind of in between, because some of the stuff coming in clearly was something manufactured originally for military purposes and then did end up in private hands somehow or another. That's not unheard of. But these, to me, it seems more likely that these were always kind of privately owned firearms. Another kind of historic note to kind of correct some misconceptions is, so you see, I don't know how visible it is on camera. I'll try and get it to focus, but we have here this designation M83 and then /83. Some folks seem to think that this is a model designation, because we do see that oftentimes with firearms, and including Yugoslav firearms, right? We've heard of M24 47s and M59 66s, and they think that this is the same sort of thing, that this is some kind of modification. I don't believe that that's actually accurate. I think that the number that follows the slash is actually the year of production, because I've seen examples where the full year, 4 digits, is spelled out, so it'll say M83/1990. But I've seen, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, all the way up to like 98 or so, which would suggest that, yeah, these are production years. It's kind of an unusual way to notate that, but it is appears to be what they've done here. Now, this is not to suggest that there weren't actual modifications done to this design throughout its kind of production life. I was too lazy to remove the grips for this video, but this is kind of the later pattern of frame, actually. And so basically what we see here is that underneath the grip panels, right here kind of in this corner, this rear corner of the frame, there's actually what looks like a roll pin, and that interfaces with some holes on either side of the grip panels. It just adds a point of contact, some stability to the grips. The earlier pattern actually has a milled like bridge in the frame right about here, and there's a kind of a larger stud, and it does the same thing. It interfaces with holes that are in the grips as well. And so apparently there was a simplification step performed to just eliminate that operation and just put the little pin in the corner of the frame instead. This change appears to have been done right around 1990, 1991. And I say this because I've seen frames with the 1990 date that have the old style, but the 1991 with the kind of the simplified style. This will become relevant if you're looking to change out grips, which you may do for reasons that we'll get into in a little bit. Just something to bear in mind. On top of that, of course, they did offer a few other things, like for example, there's more. This one is blued, but there were other options as far as finish goes. And this happens to be the 4-inch barrel, but they offered a 6-inch barrel as well. Now that we've covered the history, let's take a look at some of the design details and the features of this in case you're completely unfamiliar. It is chambered for a 357 Magnum. It is a 6-shot revolver. We have the push-forward style of cylinder latch, as you just saw. We have a drift adjustable front sight and a fixed rear sight. We have a transfer bar, so no firing pin directly on the hammer. It's a double action, single action trigger. The trigger, by the way, on the double action at least, is said to be very, very heavy. It's not extreme, but it is on the heavier side for sure. My trigger gauge says it's right around the 15-pound mark, so um, pretty bad, but not the absolute worst. This one has a 4-inch barrel rather, but there are other barrel lengths available. There's nothing terribly novel about this design. There's no kind of peculiar engineering decisions here as far as closing cylinder gaps or anything like that. You may have noticed these kind of weird asterisk-looking screws, and you might think, how do you remove those? Well, they're actually just a series of straight lines, and so uh, flathead would actually do just fine. These are not an actual clone of any one particular design. There are kind of influences of Coles and Smith & Wesson, and according to Center Fire Systems, they've even borrowed some design elements from Court. I don't know whether that's true because I'm not really familiar with Court revolvers at all. I'm actually not much of a revolver guy in general, but fairly standard, very hefty, kind of all steel construction, 357 6-shooter. Nothing terribly exciting about it. Now, because this is not a direct clone of anything, you may have some concerns about parts and accessories compatibility. Those concerns are largely justified, although not 100%. So as far as accessories go, I don't have any on hand to try, but I've heard that the HKS, and I've seen evidence of this actually, that the HKS Model 10, I believe, if memory serves, speed loaders do work in these, so that's at least an option. As far as holsters go, I don't know that anybody is currently making them specifically for this, probably not. I would suspect that, holsters for revolvers of kind of similar dimensions, but for more mainstream manufacturers, whether that's Colt or Smith& Wesson or Taurus or something like that, they may fit by coincidence. I don't know that there's anything, in fact, I kind of doubt at this time that there's anything made for specifically these as of yet. But as far as accessories, that's kind of all that I would know. As far as parts go, this is where things can get even more challenging. I don't know that anybody's taken one apart and like compared it side by side with every last bit to some other model that it could potentially be partially based on. I've heard that the mainspring, there's at least an option or two that will fit just by sheer coincidence. So if you want to lighten up that trigger pull, that's at least possible. As far as I know, there's really not much else that is compatible that's known so far at least. As far as grips go, which again you may want to replace, there is a manufacturer, and that's what's on here right now, producing like new production G10 grips. These are styled after the factory originals. But as far as if you kind of like some grip options that exist for some of the more mainstream manufacturers, I don't know of any that are confirmed to be a drop-in fit. I've seen people try Smith & Wesson K-frame, and that's a confirmed does not fit, and it's not even particularly close as far as, maybe it'll fit with some modifications or anything like that. These, by the way, are fingerprint magnets. But in any case, I've also seen a couple of comments, and these are just unconfirmed strangers on the internet talking, saying things like that the Taurus kind of medium large frame grips might work. But again, this is literally a couple of posts of people saying that they heard it might. I have seen no confirmation that they actually will. So as far as grips go, not too many other options out there either. Okay, let's get into what we can expect from these condition-wise. As I mentioned in the intro, AIM had these listed as an X grade, which they sort of define as being a not so nice cosmetic condition, but functionally, mechanically, completely working. And that it totally fits the bill in that regard. In fact, I think it's actually a nicer shape than they probably gave it credit for. We do see some finish wear, for example, where the cylinder latch slides. We do see some nicks along here, and that's on both sides. That's a little bit unsightly. Not absolutely terrible. We do see some scuffing in the frame right here. Let me see if I can get the light to catch that. It's pretty mild overall, really. It's not too bad by any means. The bore, by the way, is bright and shiny. This clearly didn't even get shot all that much. I would say what may have merited it being called an X grade in their eyes is that the original grips, which are these, what they shipped with, are actually cracked. Let me see if I can get it to show. Not that it really matters that much, but right here. Maybe that's what got it into the X grade. By the way, these grips, they're clearly handmade. You can see that because they're fairly crooked, for example. We do see this runny finish on the bottom. They fit my right hand reasonably well, but I am left-handed, so I had to kind of get the replacement grips for it. Not sure what I'll do with these. That's the other thing to note about these is it's kind of a lot of the retailers that are offering these, it's luck of the draw as far as what grips you get. You could get factory grips that are, in good condition. You can get ones that are, potentially chipped or cracked or modified, and a lot of them come with what appear to be entirely handmade grips. It seems to be quite common for these. There's the FYI. I don't know of any that lets you like hand select for like factory grips, for example, which I think is what most people would prefer. But overall, in really very nice shape, especially for something called an X grade. I would have expected it to look much worse. Okay, so am I happy with this purchase? Would I recommend it to anyone else? I would say I'm pleased with it. I mean, it was $3. It's a solid, seemingly reliable, well-made 357. What's there to complain about? Would I recommend it to anyone else is a question that I can't answer for you for certain, but I can kind of offer perspective from two sides. One as a collector and enthusiast, and then kind of one from a more practical perspective. As a collector enthusiast, if you're into Yugoslav firearms, which I sort of am, you're into Zastava, that sort of thing, to complete your collection, yeah, absolutely, why not? These have not been available up until recently, and they may not be forever since they're discontinued and only so many were made. Once they're gone, they're gone. Sure, I would say that if you want to complete your Zastava collection, absolutely, or your Yugoslavian collection, why would you not? If you're just into having things that few other people do, sure, that too. If you're talking about milsurp collecting specifically, it doesn't really fit the bill because it's not really military surplus. It's at best maybe military surplus adjacent, just because it was sold by a government and it is made at a factory that also produces military arms. So it's, in that sense, I suppose it's adjacent, but is it a true milsurp? I think probably not, but it's not expensive to get into and there is ammo availability. So there is that. Now, as a practical firearm, I don't want to get too much into whether or not revolvers are obsolete. The fact that this is only one of two that I own, and you've probably seen how badly I handle it even compared to other firearms that, you know, you might know where I fall on that. But again, I don't want to offend anybody's sensibilities in that regard. So let's just take it for granted that you would accept using a revolver for something like home defense. Although a lot of people like them as trail guns, for example. Would I recommend it for that? Well, functionally, I don't see how it's drastically worse than some of your more mainstream manufacturers like Taurus. I mean, it's a six-shot 357. It's functional. Like, why not? Aren't it seems like they're more or less, and this is going to offend somebody, but to me, they're more or less all kind of the same. Um, it's not really quantifiably different as far as I can tell. Maybe it's got a worse trigger pull, but that's really mostly about it as far as I could tell. So I guess maybe, but except for my one major concern, of course, is parts availability, parts interchangeability, because there's very little in the way of that. I know Apex used to offer parts kits, but they're sold out. I don't know whether there's going to be any more. These are discontinued, so nobody's making parts for them right now. There's a couple that may interchange with some of the other manufacturers just out of sheer coincidence, but I suspect there's a lot that won't. So if you're going to be doing a lot of shooting, this is, that's a concern that you will have to bear in mind. That's kind of all I have to say about these this time around. So, of course, I, as always, want to thank you for watching. But I guess that's it for me this time.